Hello, I'm going to be talking you through William Blake's Songs of Experience and an introduction to this section, as well as the poem, which is also appropriately called The Introduction, which you will no doubt notice from Songs of Innocence as well. Now, as we begin to cast our way through these collection of poems, I just want to say that at times you may feel overwhelmed by some of the content and the themes, and it does take a lot of familiarity before you really get your head around your own interpretation of Blake's works. And this is not something that is a problem. It's as we kind of make our way through the poems, you're going to be able to see some parallels, contrasts with Songs of Innocence, and then it's only through building up our repertoire of his work that you will feel very confident in really seeing what his vision is. So please do not be off put if you're not understanding every single word and meaning from the offset. It will continue to build the more that we study these poems. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to give you a bit of a recap of what is meant by experience, then how that links with Blake's own views and political views for this collection of poetry, before I talk you through the introduction and thinking about how this is connecting to what we have seen before. So if we cast our minds back then, we know that both collections are about this contrary state of the human soul, innocence and experience. So experience here is seen as the contrast of obviously innocence, and we start with the fall of man and this world of sin. Now, I asked you to do some reading into the childhood state and that sort of capacity for innocence at that stage in life, because it's almost like the childhood state is protected from a fall into a sinful world. But Blake is never saying that the child is immune to this, because obviously we've seen with the chimney sweeper, we've seen with the little black boy, that sometimes the childhood naivety and blissful ignorance is actually complicit in, well, making the status quo unchanged. And actually there is a problem if we don't challenge society as well. So with experience then, and when I think about experience, I have to link back to my own personal lived experience as well. And I think about a time when I went skiing for the first time about 2 years ago, and I was terrified. I was so scared that I was going to break every bone in my body if I went even a little bit faster, which really annoyed me. But the children on the slopes were just whipping around everywhere, and I just felt if I didn't have that fear, then I would almost be free to really enjoy this even more. So I think the state of experience then is this movement away from childhood vitality, and sort of those inhibitions are more contained, because we begin to worry about the fears of things, and we have anxieties and pressures of our own. But also we're more aware of the social and political corruption which is occurring in our society. Whether we are to challenge that or not is another sort of question to ask ourselves. And I think Blake is really highlighting how so many people just kind of adhere to the status quo and just think, well, this is what it is and we can't do anything about it. So it'd be really interesting as sort of a critical interpretation to consider how Marxism also feeds into this as we are a contemporary reader of his work. You know, we obviously need to deal with this in Blake's time and his intentions, but by all means, this is still a poem that can be analysed and brought out with further interpretations through theory. That's the excitement of it. And that's why we always deal with works of literature being present and living, breathing things. So some of the themes that we're going to be exposed to in Songs of Experience consist of poverty, consist of child labour, abuse, and that repressive nature of the state and the church, which you may be certainly familiar from in London when you studied this for GCSE. So then, to remind you, Blake's own view on this is that he was deeply concerned by repression, and he believed that ultimately it was this repression and the conventional morality which was set by the church institution, which would be the thing to obscure man's vision. So we've kind of seen this obscurity through various imagery in Songs of Innocence already, from the clouds, from the vapour, from the mists, from the dew. So it's almost like there is that sort of atmospheric film, which is always having the capacity to cloud the childhood state. So now that's kind of given an even more prominent symbolism, I guess, as we move on to experience. And for Blake himself, he felt that it was only by kind of adopting the childhood innocence and creativity and that kind of lack of inhibition that actually we would be able to rid man of the blinkers of the repressive state. So this idea of, obviously we've seen sexual freedom, we've seen sort of challenging the status quo, exploration, adventure, all in Songs of Innocence, but and you know, Blake is saying that this is necessary in order to move on, or to be able to expose the flaws in society and make this better. So if we cast our mind back to the introduction of Songs of Innocence, we saw that there was that pastoral setting which opened the poem. So this idea that it was positioned in this world of paradise, of blissful innocence, of creativity, of freedom, and there was that kind of happy, playful interaction between a piper and a young child who is on a cloud. So we've got these kind of very inherent biblical images, but most of all kind of happiness with a tinge of sorrow when the child begins to cry, and that sort of understanding that one day the child will experience a world of corruption and fear. So it was never as clear cut as to say Songs of Innocence, oh, okay, well that's just the happy state of childhood. There was always that jarring nature of that foreboding really of what was going to happen later on in life. So in a similar sort of note then, Introduction is, in contrast to the first one, set up in the fallen world. So what I mean by that is this is set in a world of sin, okay, which is a contrast to the paradise that we've seen in Songs of Innocence. And rather than having the piper, who is the narrator of this poem, or most of it, we have the bard, and we've seen the bard in Holy Thursday, and we know that their sort of their official role within the church. So we have this sort of religious nature from the offset. Now, the nature of this poem is almost like a calling, just like the first introduction was, and it's a calling to address really the earth and its people, in order for them to break free from notions of slavery, not just the conventional ones that we think of first off, but also slavery of a different sort as well. So the tone is very apocalyptic. It's like we're coming to the end of society if we don't open our eyes and see the clouding obscurity that lays in front of us. So I'm going to talk you through the poem now. So we have, hear the voice of the bard, who present, past and future sees, whose ears have heard the holy word that walked among the ancient trees. So we know here that the bard is the one who is proclaiming the holy word. So the holy word is usually reference to the word of God, and in this case it would be the Old Testament. So we know Blake's own personal views about the Old Testament and his dislike, well, not dislike, but his lack of support for this. We know that he has greater affiliation with the idea of Christ and God in a human form. And this sort of like knowing that the bard has about all of time. So one thing that we need to be very conscious of right from the beginning is that we must question the narrative position, because can we trust the bard? Can we trust that he has the correct conventional holy words, or actually is his own views tainted by the world of experience, which has contaminated those views? So it makes our stance as a reader more complex as we really consider the role of the omniscient narrator, or this omniscient character as well. And how is it that he comes to understand all of time? Is that possible? Is that what Blake's arguing about experience? And that walked along among the ancient trees. So the trees there being a reference to the tree of life or knowledge. So we know that this bard has walked through the tree of knowledge, tree of, the world of experience. So is he therefore right to listen to? If we think about the childhood state, it was almost one that was innocent, free, loving, open, closer with God. So why on earth would we want to, learn from someone who's preaching from a world of corruption and experience? So calling the lapsed soul and weeping in the evening dew, that might control the starry pole and fallen light renew. So as we move on to the second stanza, there's this repetition of falling and the lapsing soul. So there's an obvious correlation here with Adam and Eve. They are the lapsed souls, arguably. They are the ones that drove themselves from the world of paradise to the world of experience and all the dark and danger that came with it. So they are the fallen souls. They're the sinners who opted for that rather than the spirituality and imagination that existed before that. We have this repetition of weeping and evening dew, which we've certainly seen in the little boy lost and found. So this idea that we're kind of sinking now into this dark and sinister world. And we even have language very linked with power and control here as well. I mean, we even have the word control. So this idea that it's by using this vernacular that creates restriction for us in our society. The starry pole, so this guiding light. But who is the guiding light? Is it here the voice of the bard? And if so, it shouldn't be a positive guiding light for us. And finally, fallen, light renew. So all optimism and kind of opportunity is lost now because the light has gone. So once again, a reference to the biblical fall of Adam and Eve, and also the impressionable man, who is unable to break away from the materialistic world that they are now set amongst. In terms of context, it's wise to bring in Blake's own views on the Industrial Revolution and how he felt that this was tainting and corrupting society, and how we would be veered away from the spiritual values of humanity in place of more sort of trite values in life. So if we move into the third stanza, O earth, return, arise from the dewy grass, night is worn, and the morn rises from the slumberous mass. So the earth here has been personified because the speaker in this case is wanting the earth to wake up to this realization that it's being tainted, it's being corrupted by this materialistic world, and that we need to rise above it, and we need to have our own enlightenment and spiritual awakening to move on from this. So we have references in this stanza to darkness of night that we've seen before, linked to the world of experience, and also how this coincides with ignorance as well. We also have a reference to the word worn. Night is worn. So it's almost like if humanity is entirely worn out, tired by society, then that's the perfect time in order to be indoctrinated, because you're not going to challenge if you are tired of things. If you're worn out, run ragged, then that's a perfect opportunity for control, because people are worn down. But the morn can rise from the slumberous mass. So it's kind of suggesting that the soul now is sleeping. It's not addressing the problems in society, and the problems associated with materialism, but yet we are invited, and we should invite ourselves to greet the morning and experience the spiritual awakening. One thing I just forgot to talk about, in the second stanza, I just skipped over the starry pole. Now, this is a really, really interesting image that I would like you to do some more work on, because alongside the Industrial Revolution, which was kickstarting, we also had new knowledge coming out in terms of science and reason, which was actually meaning that the poetic creativity wasn't actually needed in as strong a role as it had done in society prior to this. And actually, the starry pole and science and reason asks us to find answers outwards all the time, when actually Blake is arguing if we're always looking outwards and searching for new knowledge all the time, then how are we supposed to reflect on the inward state of ourselves and that inner development of our souls? So actually, he's kind of warning us that of the problems that may lie if we delude ourselves with science and reason without addressing the inner state of our soul. So the final stanza then, turn away no more. Why wilt thou turn away? The starry floor, the watery shore is given thee till the break of day. So arguably at the end of this poem, we have the speaker, we're not sure who the speaker is addressing. Who are they asking to turn away no more? Is it the bard? Is it the poet? Is it the holy word? Is it humanity? Who is needing to turn away? But with that, undeniably there is this pressing tone. Like, we need to understand that if we continue to allow repression to occur, how is life supposed to get any better? We have this repetition again of the stars, the starry floor, and I think through the imagery of the star, we have Blake here symbolising a lot of things. We have the monarchy, war, science and reason through Newton's own theory of single vision, which all of it rejects looking inward and looks outward, and Blake is stressing the issues concerned with that. The watery shore, once again, you'd be looking out to the watery shore rather than seeing what's 2 feet in front of you, is given thee till the break of day. So that last line is an ambiguous one. Is it the fact that hope will come and man will realise the jealousy, the materialism, the reason which is corrupting our current vision? And therefore, man must really free his own creative potential and spirituality in order to combat this? Or is it the fact that the bard here is desperate to be distracted from his own real life of imagination and the society to perpetuate these desires?